This Thursday is Thanksgiving. It's my family's holiday, where for years we have strong gastronomic traditions like my mother's cherry stuffing. Watching my dad carve a steaming turkey, sneaking a taste or two, and my sister-in-law's super spinach salad, laden with honey roasted walnuts, pears, and goat cheese. If you get it last, you get the good stuff at the bottom. I always secretly hope there is that sweet potato thing with the marshmallows on top and the green bean thing with the fried onions. I I have a secret affection for that cranberry jelly in a can as well. Did you know those ridges on there are from like the inside of the can, not just a slicing guide? Our table has grown, and over the past few years, we meet at my sister's around connected tables in her basement. We catch up over dinner, the kids full of giggles and restlessness. We've had a tradition of a scripture reading, a long prayer, and saying what we're grateful for. Recently, it seemed our conversations have become a little shallow. We're conscious not to speak up of certain topics. We're too cautious, it seems, and so we just stick to our updates. After dinner, we set up the self timer and take a family portrait before changing into our football clothes for our annual football game. We huddle together slightly awkward, shoulder to shoulder, so we all fit in frame. The last person needing to press the button and then run to get back, squeezing together before the timer runs off. This makes us all laugh. And so each year, our pictures are kind of as though the photographer made some dorky quip about saying cheeseburger. After football and questionable rulings on the field, we come in for warmth, coffee, and homemade pie. The energy slows down as we dissipate into different areas of the house for cards, television, and or napping. This year will be the first in many years that I'll be away from my family on Thanksgiving. I am so longing to go home and to be together, to share hugs and closed spaces like normal. Each part sounds so good, every single part. I just can't wait to get back to normal. I also can't wait for January so our government can recover a level of respect and open our arms to the world again. I can't wait to feel comforted by the election signs going back in the garage, the hate symbols getting rolled back up and put away. I'm so excited to remove this symbol from my neighborhood and from the front pages of the newspaper. I feel almost this similar longing for the political language to switch back to the way it was, almost as strong as longing for ridged cranberry jelly on leftover turkey sandwiches. Today, however, we'll hear caution on the idea of switching back. Even if it's tough and it hurts, we do have work ahead of us to clean open wounds and make sure that we've really pulled out all of the asphalt before putting on a Band-Aid and getting back on the bike. Perhaps those signs should stay up longer until their owners are ready to burn them rather than to put them away for use later. I've learned much this year, I feel, listening and reading, and it is still time to learn more and still time for action. We need to use 2021 as a year for slow, deliberate rehab so we're able to properly grow. There is work to be done. Come, let us listen. Here is a story to break your heart. Are you willing? This winter, the loons came to our harbor and died, one by one, of nothing we could see. A friend told me of one on the shore that lifted its head and opened the elegant beak and cried out in the long, sweet savoring of its life, which, if you have heard it, you know is a sacred thing, and for which, if you have not heard it, you had better hurry to where they still sing. And believe me, tell no one just where that is. The next morning, this loon, speckled and iridescent and with a plan to fly home to some hidden lake, was dead on the shore. I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it break open and never close again to the rest of the world.
The old threads are unraveling. Get your needles ready. We are stitching a new quilt of humanity. Bring your old t shirts, worn out jeans, scarves, antique gowns, aprons, old pockets of plenty who have held Earth's treasures, stones, feathers, leaves, love notes on paper. Each stitch a mindful meditation, each piece of material a story. The more color, the better, so call in all the tribes. Threads of brown, whites, reds, orange. Women from all nations start stitching. Let's recycle the hate, the abuse, the fear, the judgment. Turn it over. Wash it clean. Wring it out to dry. It's a revolution of recycled wares, threads of greens, blues, purples, colorful threads of peace, kindness, respect, compassion are being stitched from one continent to the next over forest, oceans, mountains. The work is hard, but each cloth stitched together brings together a community. The work is hard. Your fingers may bleed. But this world, our future world, together, imagine it under one colorful quilt. The new quilt of humanity. This year has been tough. This is not the first time I'm telling you this. You know it and have experienced it in waves and tides that have come in and out over these past months. Waves that have smashed into you and then retreated, offering you a moment of respite in their wake. Of course, only to return again and again as surely as the sea moves in step with the sun. Moon. Again and again, we have had to confront loss, death, missed opportunities, and do so at times that are isolating, lonely, and mundane. This coming week is an important time, an opportunity for many families, a time to be together with loved ones, family, and friends, those who we need and who need us now more than ever. And yet, this year is anything but normal. And so it will be for most of us this Thanksgiving. Now, as an aside, this morning's service is not specifically focused on the United States' complex history of colonization and genocide regarding indigenous communities on this continent. Although it must be stated every year that there is a tremendous amount of healing and accounting needing to be done to address this tragic part of our nation's legacy. I was glad that some of you participated in the Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States book read this fall. That healing will continue to take time, and I hope we here at UUCCI will remain committed to it. Needless to say, Thanksgiving is a complicated holiday. But today, instead of speaking about those topics directly, I want to talk about another form of healing, and for that matter, brokenness that we might feel in regards to our family gatherings or lack thereof during this pandemic, in the wake of this past election, and with the impending holiday season upon us. I want to speak of healing from the vantage point of our relationships in our family and in this nation as a result of this very difficult year we have faced together. There is, I think, a romanticized view of breaking bread with family or friends, or in the myth of Thanksgiving with a stranger. Our offertory music this morning is a classic song with the lyrics, "We break bread together on our knees." This visual of breaking bread and sharing its nourishment with others is, pardon the term, baked into our Western understanding of this time of year. The image also carries with it a religious connotation, as is reflected in various stories throughout the Jewish and Christian scriptures. And yet, beyond the secular or religious or spiritual worldview that you might have, the imagery of breaking bread together can be quite compelling. A gesture of kindness, compassion, and perhaps healing. To offer nourishment and life to one another feels both simple and essential. And for me this year, this act of breaking bread together is complicated when we consider that for many, if not all of us, we might be doing so with broken hearts. I know it breaks my heart to not spend this Thanksgiving with my parents. It breaks my heart to consider some of the people, family and friends, who have not seen Holly in a very long time. It breaks my heart that we continue to meet online instead of in person, even as I know it is the safe and right thing to do. And so even as I prepare to break bread, I do so knowing my heart too is broken from this past year of COVID-19, of virtual ministry, of racial injustices, political gridlock, election upheaval, and many other things. What on earth do we do then with broken bread, broken hearts, and perhaps empty tables around which we will sit this Thursday? I say we turn to the wisdom of Mary Oliver, who, in her poem Kevin shared this morning, lays out a story that may break your heart. A story of impending winter, of loons losing their will to sing, who die perhaps before their song can be heard once more or for the first time. Loons who die by something we cannot even see. A tragic story for loon lovers and song lovers and for lovers of nature and life, many of you. Mary Oliver ends her poem with an admission about her story when she writes, "I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it break open and never close again to the rest of the world." When I first read this poem, it did indeed break my heart open because it helped me to think about brokenness and healing in new ways. You see, growing up, I would often be one to wear my heart on my sleeve, and sometimes as a result, become vulnerable to bullying, to pain, and manipulation. Now, at some point, I think I began to be a little less open, particularly with tough feelings and with strangers. But through closing my heart or myself off to the world, I quickly learned that it didn't save me from experiencing pain and hardship. No, in fact, it made those difficulties in life more pronounced and elongated. And so this poem, along with other experiences throughout my formation as a minister, have taught me to consider a different way of being. In short, this way of being is to recognize the brokenness of the world, to actually see it, to not turn away from it, to move towards it, not with a closed off heart, but with an open heart, to help with humility, the healing that this world, that I so desperately need. You see, by keeping my broken heart open through this time of pandemic and e-learning and political strife and virtual ministry and racial injustice. It has opened me to connect with you and others who are also experiencing a sense of brokenness to some extent right now. So, amidst all of this talk of brokenness and healing, we have Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and Christmas and Kwanzaa and New Year's over the next few weeks that feel both all too needed and all too overwhelming and complicated during this time we are living. Over the past 9 months, the pandemic has likely had different impacts on each of us, some very serious and life threatening, others more inconvenient and anxiety producing. Well, I think all of us were hoping that when this began earlier this year, that when the holidays rolled around, we would be back, as Kevin said, to normal. But of course, we are not back to normal, and normalcy seems distant at best and an illusion that we can never get back to at worst. The impending holiday season for most Americans has universalized the loneliness and separateness many of us have felt this whole year. It kind of sums it up in this next 5-6 weeks. Along with the brokenness we may feel as a nation or with members of our family in the wake of this election. What do we do when we are living in a broken nation made up of people with broken hearts, whether they admit it or not, whether we admit it or not, and we are invited in person or in garages or on Zoom to break bread together, literally or symbolically, in an ancient aspirational act of healing and gratitude. This is what I plan to do. I am going to ask someone to pass the thread. Now, I am the first, like a little bit like Kevin, to just dive into the stuffing and sweet potatoes and maybe converse more with the turkey rather than my Uncle Tom. Get it? Turkey Tom. And maybe you are too. Eye contact to the minimum, no talk of religion, politics, and definitely masks, especially this year. No talking about masks. But I think this year calls for something else. Our second reading by Julia Myers outlines that the needle and thread is perhaps the most important side dish we can bring. She writes that what I think we all know in a way to be true. She says, the old threads are unraveling. Get your needles ready. We are stitching a new quilt of humanity. Bring your old t-shirts, worn out jeans, scarves, antique gowns, aprons, old pockets of plenty who have held earth's treasures, stones, feathers, leaves, love notes on paper. Each stitch, a mindful meditation, each piece of material, a story. The old threads are unraveling indeed, perhaps for some of our family quilts. For some of us, our family quilts have been worn and ripped for some time. Perhaps the nation has been more threadbare than we like to admit, if not from the beginning. Yet what is before us is the same, whether we have known for some time of this great unraveling or we are just feeling the threads begin to come loose. Myers writes that we could think of this healing path before us in this way. She says, and I'll say again, each stitch, a mindful meditation, each piece of material, a story. We are invited to telling and listening to a story that will break our hearts again and again, not so that they become broken, but that they never close again to the world. Now here's the truth as I see it. This is not an invitation to abusive relationships, whether they be with our families, friends, or elected officials. Remaining open to the world does not mean open to abuse. It means open to healing, open to wholeness, open to wonder and mystery and love, a love that could pop up out of nowhere and bless us when we least expect it. There are likely relationships in your life that have been damaged seemingly beyond repair, and that might be true. There are some relationships that are toxic and best to let go of. And there are a lot of relationships with family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, and congregants that are worthy of our tender consideration and our gentle needlework. Yes, it takes two to tango and two to tangle, and thus we must be thoughtful in how we approach these weeks ahead. But one thing is true. We all need connection. We all need some love. We all need to be seen and encouraged to keep going, especially in these times, especially in these times. And of course, Myers reminds us what we know. The work is hard. Your fingers may bleed, but each cloth stitched together brings together a community, a world, our future world, under one colorful quilt, the new quilt of humanity. Consider your corner of the quilt, your little section of this tapestry. What type of community are you hoping to stitch? Or perhaps you and I, perhaps we underestimate the power of these hands to help with the great turning of our world toward health in these times. I believe that in the times where I have kept my heart open in the face of my own brokenness, my own broken heart, or the broken heart of others, it is in those times that I have felt the most human, the most alive, and that I can and do have important work to do in this life. Wherever you plan to spend the holidays this year, whomever you plan to spend it with, in person or through a phone call or Zoom or a Facebook message, may it serve as a small stitch of healing during this very difficult year. And may we, here in this community, not lose sight of the quilt we are working on together, a quilt that can be vibrant and strong, warm and reliable, a quilt that can be these things when we all add a little bit of ourselves, our love, yes, our pain and our broken hearts, but also our hope and our courage for a better tomorrow. May it be so, my friends, and amen.